Hello everyone, welcome to The Green Man. Hope you're all doing good and well. So this is going to be a very special video for me because I really do love the Star Wars franchise. I know how huge it's become and how popular it's become over the years. To the extent that every time a film or a TV series is released, there's sometimes massive backlashes, huge arguments online and all this sort of thing. But in spite of that, I still very much love this franchise. And I think even in this list at the bottom of my picks, there is still something to enjoy from each and every one of these films. Whether or not you love the film or you hate the film, I still think there's little bits and pieces here and there you can take from each movie. So this is, as I say, a personal list. You're welcome to disagree, but do drop your list in the comments. And if you want to justify your choices as well, feel welcome to do that, because that's probably what I am about to do as I embark on my ranking of the Star Wars movies. So let's crack on. I should also just quickly add, I've not included the two Ewok films. I've never seen those, so I couldn't fairly include those in this list. So let's begin with number 11, my least favourite film, which is The Phantom Menace from 1999. Just in the context of remembering seeing this for the first time, having seen the original trilogy as a kid, and absolutely falling head over heels in love with the original trilogy, this was just a really big disappointment for me. CGI was over the top for me, the dialogue was pretty poor, characters felt a little bit superfluous and not very significant to some of the story in this movie. But on the slightly more positive side, because I know you'll have now defenders of this film in the context of the recent sequels, in fairness, there are some, a couple of really good scenes. I really like the Red Force Field sequence with Darth Maul, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. That's brilliant. And I suppose the pod racing stuff had potential, but I didn't feel that was particularly well executed either. So, unfortunately, sorry if you're a Phantom Menace fan, comes in at the bottom here. Next up at number 10 is Attack of the Clones. So prequels fans aren't going to be too pleased with me right now, but this is at number 10 for me. I enjoy this, actually. The first half of this film I think is really good. And for me, this is one of the films with a lot of untapped potential. This was a missed opportunity for me from George Lucas, because this had so much potential, this film. It was just, again, not a well-executed movie for my money. But I did like a lot of the elements of the first half of the film, with the assassination attempt on Padme, and the Camino sequences with Obi-Wan and Jango Fett were also pretty good. And there was quite a lot to enjoy in the first half. In fact, had the film carried on more on the detective style of its first half, I think it would have been a better film overall. But sure, George wanted to get a bridging point between this and Revenge of the Sith, which I can kind of understand. But a lot of the action sequences at the end of this were just overdone for me. And again, it just suffers from the poor dialogue. The cringy romance between Padme and Anakin was just not good either. And for me, it is just one of my least favourites, I'm afraid, coming at number 10. But I can watch this film and kind of enjoy it in places. So next up, now, this is where my list starts to become maybe slightly more controversial. Maybe it already is controversial, but I've put Solo: A Star Wars Story here at number 9, which is a spin-off film. It's an okay film. I don't hate it. I certainly don't hate it. There's some good characterization. I think my biggest problem, though, is that, Han Solo here just doesn't feel enough like Han Solo. And it's difficult for the actor because Harrison Ford immortalised for me Han Solo and made him very much his character. So I do have sympathy for the actor, who I thought did a reasonable job as a whole, but for me that affected the film a little bit. Does have some good twists, some of which I found to be a bit predictable though. And I found myself sometimes looking at my watch during this film, to be honest. I did like the tie-in with Darth Maul towards the end, which was pretty good as well. But for me, it's just an okay film, not one I'm going to rush to see again and again. But yeah, it comes in here, I'm afraid, at number 9. Now, the film which I think is probably, actually, as I understand it, from doing just a couple of Google searches, this is now the least favourite of most people's picks of the Star Wars movies. So I'm going to do a tiny bit of defending, not a lot of defending, because I kind of agree with what a lot of people say about this one. Number 8, Rise of Skywalker, the most recent film in the franchise. So it's a pretty flawed film. First of all, lots of continuity problems. Characters aren't really, their plot threads. There's no good resolutions really in this film. I think the whole Palpatine thing with Rey and her heritage there was all a bit weird and a bit rushed, just for fan service purposes. And the biggest problem with Rise of Skywalker is it just felt more fan servicey than it did as a kind of an honest and well considered Star Wars film. They were obviously going for Return of the Jedi style climaxes, and to be fair, this is where I'm just going to defend this film a little bit. The performance here, a lot of them were really stellar. I think Daisy Ridley is a great actress, personally, just my opinion. I thought she did really well in all three of these films. Adam Driver as well, brilliant as Kylo Ren. And a lot of the sequences with those two in this film are really, really good. And there's some fantastic spectacles. The fighting, the lightsaber duel on that, by the ocean with all the waves crashing against them. The Death Star submerged in the water was a really cool kind of cinematic thing that I thought was pretty imaginative. The moment when Rey crosses her lightsabers and deflects back the electric bolts at the Emperor was really good as well. There's lots of spectacle in this film, and I suppose if I can defend this at all, it's just that it is a really entertaining entry for all its flaws, and in the context of the Star Wars saga, lots of people will consider this an abomination of a movie, and I can sort of see their points of view. But I also think just in its own, as a film in isolation, it's not a bad movie. It's not a bad movie, and I'm opening myself up there for probably a bit of attack, but that's just genuinely my view. So next up, we have an also quite a controversial pick. Coming in number 7 is The Last Jedi, the other pretty recent sequel from the sequel trilogy, and again similar kind of thinking here to Rise of Skywalker. Lots of problems with the story points. There was the whole thing with Finn and Rose here and the sequences there on Cantonica, I think that was the name of the planet, which were just sort of a bit overdrawn, and kind of the film lost a bit of momentum during that sequence with the code breaker as well, which I didn't really enjoy, to be honest. What I did like about The Last Jedi, and why it's quite high up, it's at number 7, so it's not very high up. I think I would be probably torn apart if I put this too high up, but what I like about Last Jedi actually are the training sequences between Luke and Rey, which I think have a nice mix of lightheartedness and seriousness to them, which feels like it reminds me a little bit of Luke and Yoda in The Empire Strikes Back. Not that I'm going to make too many comparisons to that film here, because this is nowhere near The Empire Strikes Back, but it has good moments in it. And I really also liked the Red Room scene, which for me is actually one of my favourites. I'm going to say this, the Red Room scene is excellent, and it's one of my favourites from the whole franchise. There you go. I've said it. I think Snoke was killed off too early too. He was killed off way too soon. So next up. Now, if you are a fan of the prequels, you'll be seen to at least perhaps be pleased that I'm giving this film some respect, which is The Revenge of the Sith. The third of the prequels, the final prequel. And this is a very, very good film. Finally, it felt like the prequels found their feet here, and some of the formulas began to work. So the dark tone of this film, for the most part, serves the film pretty well. The excellent sequences between Anakin and Palpatine are what shine the most for me in this film. For all of the criticisms of Hayden Christensen, I think a lot of his performance in this film is a lot better than the previous film, perhaps. And I do think that the scenes between him and Ian McDiarmid as Palpatine were really enticing and very tense and very suspenseful. The problem for me with this film, if I have anything why it's a little low down at number 6 in the middle, is because it's slightly ruined by its ending. And you know what I'm talking about here, surely. It gets very goofy. So the whole birth of Luke and Leia is really rushed, and you have that strange scene. It's funny now to watch it, but it kind of spoiled the darker tones of this film towards the end for me, which is Darth Vader simply going, no, and it was just I just thought that was unnecessary, and there were parts like that towards the end of the film. After all the work and effort that had been put in to make this film so dark and had achieved that end for most of the film, you had lots of moments like that towards the end, which just for me slightly tarnished an otherwise very good film. At number 6, Revenge of the Sith. Oh god, next up, here we go. So we're on to The Force Awakens now, number 5. I really like this film. It's, for me, definitely the strongest of the sequel trilogy, the first. So kind of you sort of got the reverse of the prequels. The prequels got better as they went on. The sequels kind of got worse. And this first film of the sequels is definitely, for me, the strongest. It really has a great feel, a great tone to the film, whereas I think got the right mix of lightheartedness and seriousness that perhaps, like Revenge of the Sith, I thought kind of went off-piste a bit with that towards the end. And lots of good performances, as always. Wonderful scene with Adam Driver and Harrison Ford, the sort of the death scene, I guess. Spoilers, I'm going to have to put a spoiler alert, but, you can't really easily do a ranking film with these films without spoilers. But, I really like The Force Awakens. I think it kind of delivers. It plays it a bit safe, which is why it's as low as number 5. I guess it plays it a bit safe for me, but it's a good film. It's a good film, and that's where I'll probably leave Force Awakens. Next up, I have now. This is another slightly controversial choice here because this is only at number 4, and this is A New Hope. It's one of the classics, one of the original trilogies. How dare you, Green Man? How dare you put A New Hope at number 4? Well, this got really difficult for me. And I have some explaining to do for the next pick, I know. But just A New Hope, for me, it was a little raw. Some of the performances you could tell were a little like that. There's a tiny bit of clumsiness for me in transitions as well and stuff, if I'm being super picky. But this is undoubtedly a classic, right? I'm now having to nitpick. This is just a classic. I can't argue with that. And I have fond memories of watching this film. Shortly before, I was actually in hospital for a brief period in my childhood years. And so I have really fond memories of this. So it's kind of, I'm surprised I've put this at 4, but I have a bit of an explanation coming up. Next up is Rogue One, a Star Wars story from 5 or 6 years ago now, I believe. The spin-off, which for me is the best of the recent Star Wars films we've had, probably since the original trilogy. I love this film an awful lot. The fact that it has just about, I mean, they're level pegging really, but this and A New Hope for me are both really great films. The only thing that's against this film, literally the one thing for me, is that it's recent. It's a recent film. So it hasn't had a lot of time to settle into people's minds as being a classic, but for me it has all the makings of one. I love the heist feel to this, the Magnificent Seven kind of war movie feel that it has for a lot of it. The supporting cast are fantastic. They are phenomenal. And the characters, the supporting characters even, are brilliant. Just for me, I just can't quite understand yet why this isn't yet got that kind of classic status, but it's just time. I think it will in the future. Great climactic moments and a beautiful bridging of this film to A New Hope. And I know it's a little bit strange I've put it above A New Hope, and I kind of thinking that maybe I regret doing that a little bit now, but of the recent films, this for me deserves a spot towards the top. Next up, we have Return of the Jedi, number 2. So you now know what number 1's going to be. It's all all a fait accompli now. But Return of the Jedi, perhaps the best second sequel I've ever seen, actually, or maybe one of them. But so many satisfying resolutions, and the scene with Darth Vader changing his mind towards the end and throwing the Emperor down the shaft in the Death Star, I think, is one of the most moving scenes I think I've ever seen in the history of my film watching. I really do. It kind of moves me still a bit when I watch it now. I think I actually kind of thought it was so good as a kid. I probably almost cried. It was that good. And even today, it kind of moves me a little bit when he changes his mind. It's just so powerful. It's so powerful, even making me feel a tiny bit emotional just thinking about it. It's just such a great scene. Anyway, I'm going to move on now to my number one choice, which is The Empire Strikes Back. Such an iconic film. I just don't think there can be much of, okay, this is all subjective, but it is just a brilliant kind of space opera film that branched out the original trilogy for me to places that it hadn't yet been before. Great twists, really good build-up. And what I love about this film is it kind of ebbs and flows a little bit. So you have the amazing Hoth battle, and then it kind of takes a break back a bit to sort of, introduce, Yoda and really create a really strong, diverse kind of a storyline. And it's all the build-up they do with the core characters and the work they do, particularly with Luke, I think, in this film, that creates the awesome climax towards the end and just gives it almost a Shakespearean kind of feel. I mean, it is iconic. It is The Empire Strikes Back. And for me, it's my number one choice for my favourite Star Wars film of all time. Thank you everybody for watching. As always, do feel free to drop a like and subscribe if you like these kind of lists. I do, of course, do mostly album reviews and rankings, but I also branch out a bit to sci-fi and horror and fantasy as per this video. Otherwise, from me, it's bye for now. Take care, everybody. See you later.